So as we see, we do have riders over here in the park, and me and Mrs. Crime over here giving you some video footage. Right now we're at the Riverview Cemetery. It's about 40 degrees out here in Portland, Oregon. And as you see, there's a lot going on around here. Nice. Wow. Mr. Wade here. Now, and Mrs. Crime, of course. So right now, I'm looking for a grave. His name is Nathan or Nathaniel Harvey. Now, who is he? Now, there was things called the Ardenwald Axe Murders that happened way back. A whole family was bludgeoned to death. This guy was to blame, but he got off on it, which means that someone else was put to blame for it. So, but he was actually the neighbors of the house that got bludgeoned. Now, this happened way back. So, Mr. Wade and Mrs. Crime is taking you guys on a journey to find this grave. The Ardenwald Axe Murders is an unsolved mass murder that occurred in the early morning of June 9th, 1911 in Ardenwald, Oregon, United States, then the community of Portland. The victims were a Hill family: William Hill, his wife Ruth, Ruth's 2 children from a previous marriage, Philip and Dorothy. All 4 victims have been bludgeoned to death with an axe. Because both of the female victims were sexually assaulted, it was believed by authorities that the murders were motivated by sex and possibly the work of a sex maniac. In the spring of 1911, William Hill and his wife, Ruth. In 1878, Ruth's 2 children from her previous marriage. They all got together, nice family, and they located immediately in south of Portland. William had built a cottage himself, and the family moved into the home in early May of that year. At approximately 8 o'clock a.m. on June 9th, the wife of C.W. Matthews, a neighbor of the Hills, knocked on the front door of their home after her husband noticed that William had not left the residence as normally he did each morning to catch the streetcar which leads to his job, the Portland Natural Gas Company. Upon receiving no answer, Miss Matthews peeked into the front windows of the home and saw the bloodied body of a 4-year-old Dorothy laid out on the floor. Clackamas County Sheriff Ernest Mass arrived shortly after the Matthews reported the crime. It was estimated that the murders occurred around 12:45 a.m. based on a broken clock in the cabin that had stopped at the time, along with the neighbor's report that his dogs had been barking loudly around this time. The bodies of Ruth and William were discovered entangled in bed, Ruth's lying beneath that of her husband's. It was determined that after Williams had been bludgeoned to death with an axe, Ruth was then struck twice in the head, and both parents were deceased. 8-year-old Philip was subsequently bludgeoned to death, with Dorothy being last to die. Though some jewelry was missing in the Hills residence, other valuables, money were left behind, leading Sheriff Mass to exclude a robbery as a motive for the crime. Because of the violent and sexual nature of the murders, Mass believed that sex was the motive and that the assailant may have been a pedophile. In order to assist the investigation, Mass brought a bloodhound from Seattle to complete searches of the Hill property and surrounding area, but these efforts did not prove anything. A coroner who examined the body stated that Williams' injuries had left his head completely chopped to pieces on the right side, especially on the right side above the eye, deforming his whole face. Ruth, similarly, sustained a severe skull fracture that extended from above her right eye across her whole face, as well as another fracture that broke her teeth and lower jaw. Dorothy had sustained several skull fractures to both the front and the back of the head from the axe blade, while Philip's head found wounds appeared to have been inflicted with the handle of the axe. Based on examinations of Ruth's body, it was determined that she had likely been raped after death, while Dorothy had been sexually assaulted prior to her murder. Bloody fingerprints were found smeared on Dorothy's body, as well on Philip's arms. Now, as I hopefully find this grave, as you know, Mr. Wade is bad at finding graves. But I'm in the right section. Section 108. Now, back to the story of Mr. Nathan. Now, this guy here was so deranged, lunaticish they may call it, that he was swindled enough to get off on the murder before that, and his family that got bludgeoned, they blamed him because he was actually mad at them about something. Now, in further research, I seen that one of his brothers were actually involved in a murder crime. So the family kind of has a little history. So I'm looking for his grave. Stay tuned. Hopefully Mr. Wade can find it. Wow. On the morning of the Hill murders, a vagrant named Edward Ramsey was arrested at Oaks Bottom while attempting to float on a makeshift raft. After his arrest, it was believed by authorities that Ramsey had been the subject of a series of complaints spanning several years regarding an unknown man lurking in the communities east of Portland. Ramsey was a drifter. He lived in the woods and subsided by trapping animals and stealing food to make subsistence. Though initially considered a suspect in Hill's murders, he was ultimately cleared of suspicion. On December 20th, 1911, a 55-year-old nursery owner named Nathan Harvey, who had lived 100 yards, approximately 191 meters from the Hill residence, was charged with the murders of all 4 victims. Harvey, an Iowa native local landowner, had been in a land dispute with William Hill prior to the murders. Upon investigations, it was discovered that Harvey had already been loosely connected to various gruesome crimes. In 1894, an 18-year-old woman named Mamie Welch was murdered in a strawberry patch on the Harvey's property, and her body found lying next to the adjacent road. A series of other murders and mysterious deaths occurred within the Harvey family. In 1896, one of his brothers shot their mother to death before killing himself. And in 1899, one of Harvey's other brothers was found drowned in a mill pond in Milwaukee. Upon questioning Mr. Harvey's neighbors in Ardenwald, Mass reported that several women told him Harvey had made improper proposals to them, as well as insulting them. Mass subsequently stated that he had absolute proof that Harvey had taken the last train to Ardenwald on the Interurban Railway from Consetero, which arrived in Ardenwald at 12:25 a.m. on the night of June 9th. 2 witnesses stated they saw Harvey exit the train at Ardenwald station at this time. Now, despite the charges, Harvey had a large number of supporters who professed his innocence and protested his arrest. On December 23rd and 26th, mass meetings were held in Milwaukee, Selwood, Durham, with over 500 signatures were gathered calling for the charges to be dropped against him. Some locals, however, spoke out against the protests, with one anonymously landowner telling the Oregonian newspaper except by his friends, Harvey is feared. There are those possessed of evidence in the case that could incriminate Harvey. If fears of possible retribution from the man are allayed, I think they can be induced to tell what they know. Now, while Mass was convinced that Harvey was behind the murders, the charges him with ultimately dropped on December 27, 1911, pending further investigation. And he was released during a preliminary hearing in February 1912 at the Clackamas County judge formally closed further investigations against Mr. Harvey. In May 1917, William Riggin confessed to shooting William Booth at Willamina in October 1915. During his confession in the killing, Riggin also claimed to have witnessed the Hills murders along with a Mexican man who went by the nickname of Brown, a man named William Flynn, the later as alias of Edward Ramsey. Riggin claimed to have met the men in Oregon City and that they planned a robbery scheme together, looting local homes. According to Riggin, he watched outside the Hills cottage while Brown, armed with an axe, and Flynn entered to rob the family. Riggin claimed to have watched outside the cottage for approximately 30 minutes, during which he heard children screaming inside. After the murders, Riggin claimed Brown and Flynn exited the cottage with approximately $1,400 worth of gold and silver for his role in the robbery. Riggin claimed to have been paid just $100. Upon further questioning, Riggin changed his account of events, instead claiming in a formal statement made July 21st, 1917, to have participated in the robbery and murders with Ramsey, not the anonymous Brown and Flynn. Riggin's two divergent accounts were riddled with consistencies regarding the Hills cabin and other logistics. Despite this, Riggin was able to point out specific locations regarding the crime, including the site of the cottage, which had been demolished after their murders. So Mr. Wade here. So if you guys must really know, Mr. Wade took a nice spill twice out there, down here, this long area, trying to find the grave of the guy that was blamed for the murder in the Axe Murders, and couldn't find his grave.
Are you okay, Mr. Wade?
But Mr. Wade will post. He will post the actual find the grave photo.
Oh, I shouldn't be laughing.
And everything else in his video that you got of him.
He's getting the
my hands
job.
are dirty from the mud. Some rain out
The
here.
story's out there for you guys.
So,
a little bit.
unfortunate story to the family that was killed in the Axe Murderers out here in the late back in the day. This guy here, Nathan, was to blame, but he got away with it. And Mr. Wade and Mrs. Crime could not find the grave. Probably because it's all money out there. It rained. But stay tuned for a lot more.
The things that Mr. Wade does for you.